Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a Ukraine war news update, second part thereof for the 16th of March 2024. This is the military aid segment. I keep having to split it off from my geopolitics one because of time constraints, and it just takes a long time, and there's so much news happening at the moment. It'll calm down soon and I'll put them back together. Anyway, we're going to start with our best friend, Mike Johnson, and I have to say, if you're going to get angry at all this weekend, just get angry with him about this and then just move on. Just purge yourself of the anger. This tells you all you need to know about where Mike Johnson really is. So this is him speaking.
And certainly at this time, in many ways, our hearts are heavy in spite of the fun fellowship, because stability is being threatened in Europe and in the Middle East. And our allies and friends, such as Israel and Taiwan, continue to fight for their very right to exist. And certainly at the...
Hang on. Israel and Taiwan fight for their very right to exist. Our friends, Israel and Taiwan. Taiwan's not fighting at the moment. I'll tell you who is fighting, Ukraine. Who didn't you mention there? Ukraine. What? Why would you not mention Ukraine? They are fighting for their right to exist more than those other two nations. Speaker Johnson just said in a speech that, quote, the heart is heavy because we live in times when, quote, stability in Europe and the Middle East is under threat, and our allies and friends such as Israel and Taiwan continue to fight for their very right to existence. Not a word about Ukraine. And that is why that aid package in the Congress is still in the Congress. Meanwhile, in Europe, following the meeting of the Weimar Triangle, France, Germany, Poland, today in Berlin, Germany's Chancellor announces the following immediate measures together with the French President and Polish Prime Minister to support Ukraine. Okay, before we get there, I had some, I guess, probably Russian trolls saying on my thread about Macron's interview that happened the night before this. Oh yeah, it's just words, whatever, it doesn't mean anything. And you're like, yeah, it's not just words. If straight away afterwards you go to meet with the German Chancellor and the Polish Prime Minister and agree a bunch of stuff that you're actually going to do, then actually that's rhetoric that underwrites your approach in terms of doing stuff. So my support of Emmanuel Macron and his positioning is borne out by the fact that he straight away went and did all this. So, one, immediately more procurement and military aid for Ukraine on the entire world market. And this is incredibly significant, again, for France. So France is tangibly doing things or changing the way they're going to do things. So before, they were the ones mainly who were saying, no, we can't buy stuff on international markets because we need to support our own national industries or our own EU industries. It's very much something, as I was speaking with Daniela yesterday, that France are very good at. You go to France and you look at all the cars and vans on the roads, or particularly the cars and vans of public entities like the post office and whatever. They're all Renault or Citroën or Peugeot. So they don't buy outside. Yeah, free market, great, but we're only buying French stuff. So that's very much in their national psyche. So when it comes to decisions about what the EU does in terms of buying defense equipment, it's understandable that the French are going to say, yeah, we need to buy our own stuff because, you know, it puts money in our own coffers, taxes, employment, etc., etc. That was then a problem for getting stuff to Ukraine quickly. Yeah, that's great if you're not in a rush to get this stuff. Yeah, you can build up your own industries and you can ramp up production of shells. But you know what? That'll come online in what, 2 years? Okay, fair enough. This isn't an investment in your post office. This is an investment in saving a country that's next door getting hammered. Okay, so France has said, well, Emmanuel Macron said, right, fair enough, we can buy stuff from outside of the EU on the world market. So that is huge. Two, expansion of production of military equipment, also in cooperation with Ukraine. So we know that Rheinmetall, for example, is building 4 plants in Ukraine, and other German entities, I'm sure, are as well. Well, French entities are getting involved in that too, and Macron's at the helm of that. And of course, Poland and Germany. This is relevant to all three. Three, establishment of a new capability coalition, far-reaching rocket artillery. And as I said yesterday in the live stream, this is particularly interesting because far-reaching rockets. If you are going to invest in those three nations in a coalition or start a coalition of far-reaching rockets, far-reaching must mean at ranges over the occupied territories of Ukraine. In other words, you've got like because otherwise they're literally not far-reaching. They're just medium range that you're already providing, like Storm Shadows and Scalp that the French are providing. Yeah, they can reach everywhere inside Ukraine and almost to the very southern or southeastern reaches of, well, it depends where you release the missiles from, to be honest, but of Crimea. Okay, so if you're starting that far-reaching rocket coalition, then this, I think, means that you are also giving the green light for Western equipment to be made and given or sold to Ukraine, and that to be used to shoot into Russia. I think that's massively significant. I could be wrong. I could well be wrong here, but that's how I would read that, because otherwise, far-reaching is kind of irrelevant. Okay. Four, increasing support for Ukraine within the EU framework, €5 billion via the European Peace Facility, strengthening the training mission, using profits from frozen Russian assets to buy weapons for Ukraine. So all of those things are all good. This is ramping up European support for Ukraine in a very organized manner. Excellent stuff. Right, Finland has also come out kind of in support of the not saying that we can't use troops, so supporting the Macron's approach here, and Czechia, and the Baltics, and Canada even. So it's important that we not rule everything out in the long term, because we never know how serious the situation becomes, says Finnish Foreign Minister Valtonen. But the Finnish position is clear. We are not right now sending any troops and not willing to discuss that. So it's like, yeah, fair enough. We ain't doing that now, and we're not likely to do that now, but we ain't going to rule it out. Good position, correct position. EU Commission announces it has mobilised €2 billion for defence projects and deals aimed on armaments production, joint purchases and research. One of its aims is to speed up deliveries to Ukraine. So the EU really trying to do as much as possible, especially given the impasse in Congress in the US. Now, just to give you an idea, both Thierry and Germany from Ukraine got back to me when I said, "Oh, I don't know how much a bit of Gepard ammunition costs." And Germany from Ukraine was like, which is broadly what Thierry said, $500 to $600 per round. So when you're firing that lead up from a Gepard self-propelled anti-aircraft gun, you're firing all that lead into the air. And this is a relatively cheap piece of air defense equipment. I mean, it's old and effectively obsolete, although it's obviously not obsolete now. But compared to like firing a Patriot at a drone, if you can take it out with a heavy machine gun effectively, then that's cool. Except actually, each round is costing $500 to $600. You're like, do 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 do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's it. Oh my goodness, that's like just in that couple of seconds, that's $6,000 worth of lead in the air, so to speak. So yeah, these things are expensive, even if they are smaller arms. Not necessarily like a Kalashnikov, but even then, how much is each individual round of them if you're firing those off into the air willy-nilly? Right, okay, anyway, I digress. Greece stepped up yesterday in a big way. So 2 weeks after the Russians almost assassinated the Greek Prime Minister, Greece announces a fat barbarian-crushing military aid package for Ukraine. 2,005-inch Zuni rockets, so these are rockets you can fire off aviation. 182.75-inch anti-tank rockets. 90,000 90mm anti-tank anti-aircraft ammo. 4 million bullets. So again, talking about how much each of those bullets cost, then, that's good. And here's the big one. 70 US-made M114A1 howitzers. So you've got 155mm howitzers, 70 of them being given. That's really good news. It's from their own stocks going to Czechia. Czechia seems to be like where everything's happening at the moment. Those rockets are 180 Hydra 70 rockets. That we've seen being utilised, I think, in Krinky, being fired from the back of a pickup. So they're not just fired from aviation; they're also, you can use them in several ways. But anyway, that's all really good news for Ukraine to get that from Greece. Greece has also joined a coalition of countries to demine Ukraine, according to the Lithuanian National Defense Minister. The country is preparing to supply Ukraine with a new batch of military aid. It will include aircraft, missiles, and all that stuff we just talked about. And then the Swedish Coast Guard is handing over 9 jet skis, or hydrocycles, I think they're called, for maritime surveillance to Ukraine. This was reported by the press service of the Swedish government. Jet skis are something that is in demand in Ukraine, and according to the Coast Guard, they can be transferred immediately. Good news there. Thanks, Sweden. Finland has also had their ASAP application approved. So this is the idea that this happened with Norway and Kongsberg, and the funding that central government can give to these in order to do things really, really quickly. And this helps expedite stuff to Ukraine. Really important. Anyway, Finland here with Namo Lapua Oy will receive, not Finland, but Namo will receive 22.5 million euros to expand the 155mm shell body production. Namo Vitavori Oy will receive 10 million euros to expand gunpowder production. I presume this is a case of the private and the public sector coming together for a greater good. So the public sector saying, right, okay, we need to get that stuff to Ukraine straight away, and the private sector saying, yeah, that's great, but that investment is like difficult for us to just, unless we've got massive contracts that take into account that investment need in these facilities, then that's really difficult for us as a private company to just suddenly do. So then the public sector comes along, the government says, okay, well, here's a whole bunch of cash, and we're giving that to you because it's in our government strategic international, interest for that to happen. So there's a good marriage going on there, I think. Talking about Norway, as mentioned, Norwegian government is investing additional funds into Kongsberg. So these are guys that make NASAMS, along with the Americans, to allow for economic order quantity, ordering subcomponents in large quantities in advance. This will allow NASAMS launchers to be provided more rapidly once orders are received. I guess this is some kind of subsidization, effectively. I don't know whether the government will get that money back. I don't know the ins and outs there, but this private entity, Kongsberg, will get a whole bunch of money from Norwegian government so that they can expedite the production of NASAMS, since they are on back order and everyone wants them essentially for Ukraine, really. Okay, John Ridge here talking, well, many people have pointed this out. So this was a rare photo of the underneath of a MiG-29, right? First of all, awesome paint job. Second of all, you can see loads of stuff on here that's really interesting. Quite a variety of missiles and bombs. So first published image of a Ukrainian MiG-29 sporting a French-provided 500-pound class AASM Hammer GPS INS, so inertial and GPS guided bomb on the port's inboard station. So that's this one here, right? That is a significant size bomb. They're getting 500 of they're getting 50 of these a month until they receive 600 from the French. And actually, this is really significant. These are high precision aerial bombs that can do a good deal of damage. Yeah, maybe not as big as some of the Russian ones that are being used, but if the Ukrainians can get these dropped on the Russians to a significant quantity, then that might be good news. Well, obviously will be good news for the Ukrainians, and then we got to start joining all the dots here. So I wonder what will happen, if anything. It goes back to what I was saying in the last video. What happens with regard to the Russian air defense system? That's a video that I'm just sending live now. What happens to the Russian air defense systems that are needed around the oil refineries and the energy infrastructure inside Russia? I mean, do they do that? If they don't do that, then the Ukrainians get to blow that up continually. And if they do that, can the Ukrainians then use these airframes more freely along the front line, because the air defences had to be pulled back to defend energy infrastructure, which at the end of the day is what kind of funds the war. Really, it's an interesting time. There's the next few months is going to be fascinating in terms of Ukraine getting to a point of throwing significant aerial munitions into Russia and causing the Russians just huge headaches. According to the Minister of the Armed Forces, the integration of the AASM bombs on Soviet-class aircraft is a French technological feat, quote. They're traditionally carried by Rafale or Mirage. Right, beyond the figures and the sums, we must think about the transfer of useful and effective military equipment, which contributes to France's credibility in the long term. This is fascinating. It's comments like that you might just read and then just go, yeah, whatever. Comments like that are super freaking important. So, one, it means that France is willing to give some seriously good stuff to Ukraine. But the reason that they're willing to give that, obviously, it fits in line with the strategic interests of France and Ukraine winning and Russia losing. But it's about France's credibility in the long term. So, credibility can be seen in a political context. Look, France is helping. Yeah, France awesome. Like we're saying about Macron, awesome. Macron's awesome. Yeah, thanks for that, Macron. You're saying the right stuff. That's a kind of political credibility where the status of France is being raised. So here, if they're giving good stuff to Ukraine, and we know about that, then their credibility is raised. But also an economic credibility. So we're giving these things to Ukraine. Everyone else is going, oh, look at those Hammer precision guided munitions that France has given. Oh, they're doing really well. Oh, can we buy some of them? And it's a bit like HIMARS giving the US an economic kind of defense credibility. Everyone's looking at them going, those are brilliant, let's buy them. Poland's bought a shed load of them. Someone else has bought more. Someone else, they're flying off the shelves. They can't build them fast enough. So there are several ways to interpret that, but it's an important statement there from Le Cornu, because we are going to see more French stuff on the front lines, and that's what we've all been waiting for. The French have been, although interestingly, as a percentage of GDP, have actually given more than the UK, right? So we go, oh, well done, UK, we've given this and that and everything, but actually financially, arguably, French have given kind of more. I think they've given more as a percentage of GDP. I do need to look at it, actually. I may be wrong. But the point is that I think you're now going to see a lot more explicit aid from France as it's all kind of ramping up based, the foundation was the rhetoric from Macron, and then you get the rhetoric from Le Cornu, and then you get the actions and then the equipment. And it's super important. Don't forget as well that Mirages are on the table. I think there's going to be stuff happening, under the radar here, where we've had hints about this. They were off the table because the Ukrainians initially said, okay, no, we're only really interested in like 2 types of airframes. So that's going to be the F-16s and the Gripens. And then, you had Eurofighter Typhoon being around the edges maybe of that. But no, it looks like the French are in there with possibly Mirages, one of their Mirages. So again, that is going to be about French credibility in the long term, and about being able to either get rid of their old stuff and renew their own domestic equipment, or advertising their stuff to the rest of the world. Okay. Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock, the German Foreign Minister, is trying to persuade Chancellor Scholz behind the scenes to deliver Taurus cruise missiles to Ukraine. For once, the Greens are receiving support from the FDP. One option could be that Germany supplies Taurus to the UK, who pass it on to Ukraine, but retain control of the mission and objectives. Someone was telling me in the comments I was reading this morning in my thread yesterday, German, saying, thanks for the video, I think, about Macron. He's saying that, interestingly, in Germany, the Greens are really, really supportive of actions against Russia, because they have been, I think, hammered by Russian information warfare, essentially. So I think they have felt the heat of the Russians in the information sphere. And being being against hydrocarbons, and Russia being so for hydrocarbons, there are many reasons why the Greens would be targeted by the Russians. So that's partly why they're so in support of Ukraine and up for, in this case, the Taurus missile to be given to Ukraine, whereas it looks like the SDP and Scholz are the ones that are holding back there. Russia is attracting more and more mercenaries from countries with difficult economic situations to the war against Ukraine. This was stated by the representative of the coordination headquarters of the treatment of prisoners of war, Petro Yestenko. According to him, many mercenaries are from Cuba, India, Africa, Nepal, and partly from Serbia. There are also representatives of Latin America, Egypt, Jordan, and Iraq. So a whole bunch of people ending up in Ukraine fighting for the Russians, and this is how the Russians are able to sustain the losses they are. There will be a significant enough number of these when you add them all together to enable the Russians to continue pressing, to continue their activities. Given that they are losing maybe 30,000 people a month, they appear to be recruiting 30,000 people a month. Well, how many of those 30,000 are coming from these countries around the world? And also, don't forget the prison population. So earlier this week, Dara Masiko spoke with Christian Amanpour from CNN about the state of the war in Ukraine. We shared reflections on the Russian military's past, and in the excerpt below, discussed what might be on the horizon for them. Interesting. So let's actually have a look at that, see what she says here. Because there's, actually, no, it's probably a bit long. But Christian Amanpour says Russia's prison population has dropped from around 400,000 before the war in Ukraine to 266,000 this year. It's 134,000 that have suddenly disappeared from the prison population. That's a massive number of people that have evidently been thrown into the Russian war machine. No wonder they can keep pressing and taking those losses. They just, and it's got that double whammy. And what I'm saying is horribly cynical. But you spend all this money on prisons, and well, you should be spending on rehabilitation. But anyway, on detaining these prisoners. Well, actually, take them all out of there. Don't pay them because we're going to promise them something at the end of their contract that we give them. Throw them into the armed forces. So we've got free soldiers. We're not now having to pay for their rehabilitation or imprisonment. And then they'll probably die. And then that solves the problem of further rehabilitation and imprisonment. So there you go. It makes a lot of sense from that really cynical point of view. If you take away morality and politics away from that, I just think that's pretty significant. I also think that Ukraine understand this and are now very much thinking about dipping into their own prison population. Although I'm sure they'll try and do it in a slightly different way to the Russian model. US and 6 other major world powers warn Iran not to provide ballistic missiles to Russia to aid Moscow's war against Ukraine. So there are claims that they provided a lot, and then there is some counterclaims saying actually no, they haven't. We think that North Korea provided about 50 or so. That was a claim that came out yesterday. Anyway, they threatened to retaliate if Iran does by cutting off Iranian air travel to Europe, among other measures. This is quite serious. So G7 nations prepared to respond with severe new penalties that could include a ban on Iranian air flights to Europe if Iran proceeds with the transfer of close-range ballistic missiles. That's coming from a senior US official. Now, cyber specialists of the SBU have blocked the supply of components for the Russian Shahed and cruise missiles, according to Ilya Vityuk. The head of the Department of Cybersecurity, the SBU, said this during a TV telethon, quote, "We overlay the supply chain of components for Russian weapons. One of the examples is that they have already blocked the supply of servo motors for the production of 1,600 Shaheds and 4,000 microcircuits for cruise missiles." So evidently some action going on there to stop the production of these. And then I wonder, you put that together with the news this morning that Russia hasn't sent a large-scale cruise missile attack into Ukraine for 38 days. Why is that? Well, could there be problems with the manufacturing of those due to the microcircuits being blocked? The microcircuits for those cruise missiles being blocked in supply due to some kind of hacking and whatnot. Anyway, the last thing I'm going to say, which is not apropos to anything in particular, but the biggest NATO fighter jet forces, says Thomas Tyner. 1, so the biggest fighter jet force is the US Air Force. 2, it's not another country, it's the US Navy. 3, it's not another country, it's the US Marine Corps. 4, it's not another country, it's the US National Guard. 5, it's not another country, it's the US Air Force Reserve. Those 5 air forces, jet forces, fighter jet forces, are bigger than any other NATO air force. So 5 American air forces are bigger than, next we've got the Turkish Air Force, then the German Air Force, then the Hellenic Air Force, that's the Greek Air Force, then the French Air Force, then the Italian Air Force. Britain not even in the top 10 there. So the idea is Europe can't defend itself without US help, and this is a realization that Europe has had for a long time. And Americans might complain about this, but that, of course, sustains a massive, massive industry. And this is where your defense, or the American defense strategy, and the idea that, yeah, okay, they're not spending enough on, we've had this conversation before, but the complaints that Europe aren't spending enough as a percentage of their GDP on defense is that on the one hand, not good enough, and America are paying more than their fair share. But you've got to understand that ostensibly America have been happy enough with that because it's part of the US's entire economy. It's like they have the top 5 biggest air forces in NATO, and they're paying for that, and that sustains industry and jobs and taxes and so on and so forth. And that's why you're spending almost $1 trillion a year on defense. But it's part of your long-term kind of budgetary economic strategy. So the more that Europe that step up, the more that they will want to be also defense independent in terms of the defense military industrial complex, the more they'll start designing and buying their own stuff. So yeah, you got the Eurofighter Typhoons, but maybe a 5th generation equivalent to the F-35. Then the US will be, oh, they're spending much more. Oh, they're spending it on themselves. Think about the French mindset. Oh, they're spending it on their own stuff, which is what the Americans do, right? But then you have a competition to the Americans in terms of selling worldwide. So then the Europeans will be able to sell much more worldwide. So, yes, great that the Europeans are spending more. Bad that Europeans are spending more, because it is a kind of zero-sum game. So there are pros and cons to this. And so it's easy for Americans to criticize the Europeans for not spending enough. But in some ways, that's beneficial for the American. Not in all ways, but in some ways. And so the Europeans spending more, that's good. The Americans don't have to spend so much, but then they lose some things in doing that. Anyway, life is just not black and white, it's grey. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Really appreciate your support. Thank you to members. You guys are legends in your own underwear. And to all those who subscribe, please press the bell and then select all when you have that drop down menu. Anyway, take care. Speak soon.